Good evening. I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Conversations with Selwyn. Thank you for joining us this evening. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, special thank you. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for you to join us. Without you, there is no show. And I'm especially honored that some of you will join me each week as I invite someone to come to appear on CWS to share their story, to talk about their journeys. And I hope that during those conversations, we not only learn about successes, we also learn about challenges and how they might have overcome their challenges. The reason being is that I believe that when we speak about our challenges and how we overcome them, imagine a young person somewhere in the world listening to you and recognizing a similar challenge and being able to step beyond their limitations and do something positive with their lives. One of the things I always encourage about going beyond ourselves and helping someone or encouraging someone unconditionally and selflessly is that we could never know the effect or the extent of how we impact someone. It's like a row of dominoes. You touch one and then you stack next to each other. You touch one and it starts a chain reaction. Now, if you're not around to see the end of it, you will never know. If you're not at the end where it ends, you will never know its effect. So to me, it is important that we always find a way to share, to give, to step beyond ourselves, to help others. It is never about us. It's about the larger self. Tonight, we have a very special guest, a son of Guyana soil, brilliant young man, the Speaker of the National Assembly. However, I'll take a break and introduce you to him when I return. I'm back. For those of you who are now joining us, I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Conversations with Selwyn. The gentleman on the other side of the screen is Mr. Raphael Trotman, our guest for the evening. Let me introduce Mr. Trotman by going into his bio a little bit. Lawyer and politician Raphael Gregory Conroy Trotman is a man of many interests and accomplishments. Following law school in Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Trotman entered private practice as an attorney at law within his family's firm and where he continues to practice. In 2001, responding to a stirring to better understand conflict and the methods for its resolution. He proceeded to the United States to study at the prestigious Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy in Boston, Massachusetts, where he was awarded a master's degree in international relations with a focus on security, conflict resolution, and development economics. He has also completed postgraduate studies at Harvard University in mediation and the National Defense University in Washington, D.C., from where he was also awarded a certificate in defense planning and resource management. And there is more, but let's start the show. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are you?
First of all, thank you for taking the time to appear on CWS. I am hoping that we have a very enlightening and wonderful conversation here this evening.
I'm looking forward to it too.
In 1990, at 24, you were a young practicing attorney at law. In 1994, you were elected a member of the mayor and councillors of the capital city of Georgetown. Then in 1998, a member of parliament. In 2006, a presidential candidate for the Alliance for Change AFC, winning a historic 5 seats in the National Assembly. And now, you are Speaker of the National Assembly. This is quite a journey, my brother. Have we been witnessing the beginning of a carefully crafted political career or the confluence of various streams of civic services to your nation?
I would say no, because I never envisaged a life in politics. Actually, I had, of course, had an interest, like most, maybe more than some young people had. And when I returned from law school, 1990, I had been invited, along with some other young professionals, to meet with then President Desmond Hoyt at the Vicingen Road residence to discuss issues affecting young people. I remember being a bit too vocal, challenging him about some of the policies of the PNC at the time, particularly for young people, and joblessness, lack of opportunities for owning a home, and so forth. And then elections came in 1992. I was not a candidate or anything, but I was quite in awe of what was transpiring on the day of elections, and was very much out there. I found myself in the headquarters of the PNC in Sophia later that night, and that was a historic election. The government changed after 28 years. And that was it for me. In 1994, I got a phone call one day, and it was actually Mr. Hoyt's secretary saying that Mr. Hoyt wished to speak to me. And when I took the call, it was him really saying that he had been invited by the president of Venezuela, President Raphael Caldera, to visit Venezuela, kind of a semi-official state visit, because by then he had been made leader of the opposition. And he was inviting me to accompany him. It was quite a shock, a surprise. I agreed, and so we spent 1 week together in Caracas, Venezuela, as guests of the president of Venezuela. And I think I got to know Desmond Hoyt very well. There are many myths about the man, that he never smiled, he never laughed, very tough. But, I saw a very human side to him. Then he spoke about his family, his children, the pain of losing them, and so forth. And I think he probably was using the opportunity to feel me out as well. We came home, and in 1994, he asked me whether I'd consider being a candidate for local government elections for Georgetown. I said yes, because my respect for him had grown. And I was a councillor. And then you mind me going on a bit?
No, fine.
Yeah, that was it. And then on
before you continue, Raphael.
One Sunday afternoon, I was at home in 1997. I knew elections were coming, and elections were then due in December of 1997. In 1997, I was home one Sunday afternoon. I got a call from him. He called me Raphael sometimes. He says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm home. It's Sunday." He said, "Well, could you come to Congress Place? We need some assistance So I went over, and he said that they were preparing for elections, which I was aware of, but they needed some legal uh, support, preparing the list of candidates, the symbols of the party, making sure that every candidate signs and that signature is properly authenticated and notarized and so forth. So of course I said yes, I would do that, and so I started working on that. That would have been sometime around, I would say, about October or so of 1997. And on the day before the nomination day, which is when the lists of candidates and everything have to be handed in, I was in an office with him and the campaign manager, Winston Murray, and a number of others. They were making last-minute adjustments. And Mr. Hoyt turned to someone and he says, "Is Raphael's name on the list?" And the gentleman looked up and said, "No, no." He says, "Well, put it on." And in a manner, in a way, that is how I found myself as a candidate for the 1997 elections. There was no discussion between us about it. And the rest, as they say, is history.
It's history.
Mm-hmm.
Before we continue, I want you to do me a technical favor. Just push your screen a little bit forward. I want to increase the space between the top of your head. No, the other direction.
Oh, sorry.
Right. Good. I think that should be fine. I want to ask you a question. Do you think if he had not done it that way, and he had asked you, you would have agreed to go on the list?
I would have needed time to consult with family, and I would have agreed perhaps, but I would have wanted a chance to think about it. Like I said, my respect for him was immense. We all have our failings and our faults, particularly leaders. People tend to look at leaders as if they're sometimes demigods, but he was a human being. He was a man, and so we had in the end, a kind of a father and son relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have done it for him. Because, of course, I had not come through the party ranks as a member of the YSM, and I had not been in the bowels of the PNC, so to speak. But for him, I believed in his vision, and I would have said yes if he had asked.
I see. How did your parents influence you as a child?
Well, both parents were lawyers. Interestingly, neither parent insisted that I study law. But I always looked particularly to my father. He had a passion for international relations and for international issues and human rights issues. So I think of the two, my father was the greater influence. My mother was the disciplinarian, the one who gave me an attitude that says that anything is possible. And so I got that from her. But my father has a more philosophical and perhaps sometimes idealistic approach to things, which is good. Quite artistic, likes his poetry. And like I said, was very consumed with international issues and human rights and justice. And so both parents, I guess, rubbed off at me, if I can put it that way, and influenced me. One gave me an attitude that says that, the sky is the limit. That's my mother. And the other one gave me an attitude that says that whatever you do, bear in mind that there are people out there who need help and support. And your job in life is to extend your helping hand to those who are in need.
With those two pillars of courage and strength and support, if you weren't a lawyer, what would you be today? What would you want?
Well, I've always I fancied myself as one of them as I like designing things, architecture, but I was terrible at a technical drawing. Could not get it, but I like creating and fashioning things. So that was where I believe I should have or would have liked to go. I still like to build and to design and to look at how things turn out. But law it is. I found more of a comfort zone, strange enough, in politics than even in law. But I believe in the beginnings, I never saw myself, as I said before, being a politician. Law I love, but I seem to have more of a passion for politics.
Well, we'll get into some of that just now.
Uh,
What story does your mother always tell about you?
what story? Probably that I was very, very bad as a child, very mischievous, constantly in need of licks. But
I know you have
I
to wait.
guess a good loving son, but I tested the poor woman to the utmost limits.
Wow.
I was a very bad
As
boy,
as more.
as guess as boys are. I
Yes,
was a
I
boy.
was about to say that as many sons do, and will.
Yeah,
So
I
what
was
were
the
you like?
ultimate.
What were you like at age 13, if you can remember?
I read a lot. School was not a primary focus of mine. I tell a story, and I told it as recently as last weekend to students at the graduation ceremony that my best grades and well grades. Let's leave that aside for now. But in our time, of course, you would be placed. And if the class had 34 or 35 students, I would be bringing up the rear at about 34 or 33, second to last or thereabouts. That was where I was. I was a backbencher, never focusing on school, which, I've always said that I have regrets because the things that I should have been learning and paying attention to, I didn't. But I read a lot, but I just did not apply myself. That's not to say that I knew that I could not. I just was, I guess, in some kind of form of rebellion or
Yeah.
rebelliousness. I just wanted to be different. So schooling at 13, reading a lot, being out there, of course, now finding oneself as a young man. In those days, of course, you didn't have a girlfriend. Nowadays, these young people have boyfriend and girlfriend relationships from 10 and 11. That was not on my plate at all. But certainly, of course, you're seeing girls around, you're taking some interest. But my primary thing was hanging out with friends and riding my bicycle about and playing some games and reading. And that was it. Socializing, perhaps too much. But I think I was a regular young man.
So if you could go back and change something related to your education or training, what would you change or what would you do differently?
Well, of course, I would have taken my studies a little more seriously. It was only after I hit fifth form and I passed O levels and got into went to sixth form that I had a kind of an awakening that this is now the serious time. But I think the fundamentals, the building blocks when you are in first form and second form, your grammar classes and your reasoning and composition, mathematics and arithmetic and so forth. A lot of those things I sailed through, just doing enough to get by. But particularly with mathematics, it was never one of my strong points at all. My reading compensated for my not being very attentive in the classroom. But like I said, I read widely, and I had a great influence in my life. There was a man who worked for my parents. His name was Harold Singh. He was just about 5 feet 2 inches tall, not very tall, but he was a giant of a man, and he supplied me with a regular supply of Louis L'Amour westerns,
Yeah, I love those.
and he started to mold me into the character of one of these lone figures, who would pass through a town, one of the Sackett brothers or so. So Harold spoke to me a lot about life, and one of the things he always said to me is that, Raphael, you're not better than anyone, but neither is anyone better than you. That's a philosophy that I've taken with me through life, and it has helped. No one is better than the other. I'm not better than, despite whatever heights I've made, I'm not better than anyone. And if there are people who've achieved greater heights than I have, that doesn't make them better than me. So that was it. I'd like to go back if I could and be more attentive, be more perhaps respecting of teachers. There was an instance where a teacher, a trainee teacher, failed her exam because of me, because she was being graded on this particular day, and I indicated to her that I had to leave at 3:00 because my mother apparently had insisted that I meet her at 3. And at 3:00, the teacher said I couldn't leave. So I weighed in the balance the wrath of the teacher as against the wrath of my mother. And I chose not to offend my mother because her wrath was no easy wrath. But years after I met that teacher, and she explained to me that when I left the classroom that day, it showed that she was unable to exert discipline and control over the classroom. And for that, she failed that exam. I really felt badly about that, and I apologized to her. So there are a number of things like that I'd like to go back and fix and to apologize for and to correct if possible.
I think we should take a break. And one of the things I am going to do, I want to, and this is for the listeners. I want to restart. We are broadcasting at a high definition, and so some of our audience is getting it kind of choppy. So what I want to do is to restart, because without our audience, there is no show, and so I have to respect that. So what I would like to do is to make some adjustments and restart the program. So to the audience, when we restart, just refresh your screen. So we'll take a break, Raphael.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Arrowhead, I love my golden arrowhead. I don't think you heard me. I said arrowhead.
Bingo.
How are we?
We are good.
Okay.
We are back, and thank you very much for your patience. As I said before, without our audience, the show cannot go on. So it was important for us to make some adjustments so everyone can enjoy this conversation. Raphael, you were saying before the break
Yes.
that you apologized to this teacher that you caused to fail her exam.
Yes.
That was noble of you, sir.
Well, the,
And so my next question is, what drives you? What makes you get up every day and do what you do?
well, a strong belief in God as head of my life, and the realization that just having life must mean more than just getting up and going to work and having a good time, and that we all have a purpose for which we've been born and created, and so we need to find out what that is as early in life as possible and as quickly as possible, and set about living out that purpose. So what I say here, I can tell you that it's not something that I have always known, but this is over the last 5 or 6 years I've had, I would say, several epiphanies, if I can use that term. And so for me, I get up every day with a renewed sense of of vigor and purpose, that I have things to accomplish, and that every second of every minute of every day must count. I don't have any more uh, periods of being bored and just feeling restless. And if I'm restless if I'm not achieving something, and that's not to say that I don't take time to relax, but even that must come out of something. It must not just be that we amble through life from birth to death without fulfilling anything. And so I have a great sense of purpose, and that I'm created to serve, and that is what motivates me every day, actually.
You've grown up among lots of politicians, or I should let me put it this way: when we were growing up, there were lots of politicians in the country, lots of role models, and so on. And so I asked this: which politician impressed you most as a child?
Well, it was interesting because I tell you, as a boy in Golden Grove, President Burnham, he was then Prime Minister, would visit our home, sometimes on horseback and so forth. And so, as a little boy, 4 and 5, seeing this man coming on horseback, or coming, was quite a sight to behold. Um, as I grew older, I actually became very good friends with Mr. Burnham's children, his daughters, and that gave me insight into him from a more personal level. And again, many of the myths that we hear, they're just not true, because the family, they're conserved. I remember once in Barbados, leaving a pipe on, and Melanie saying you can't waste water. I never saw extravagance in them. I never, saw many of the things that people spoke about. Burnham was considered, called racist and all kinds of things. I don't know, but I would, at Belfield, I would see that the person who he turned to cook for him the most was a nice elderly East Indian woman who wore that kerchief on the head. She, this couldn't be a man who hated or distrusted East Indians, so, because she was the one who cooked for him more than most others that I would see. And then I also, when we moved to Sir Brianville in Georgetown, my neighbors and very good friends were Dr. Jagan's nephews, Kevin and Raymond Ali. And so I got us growing up with them too. I was able to see the Jagan side of the family. And, go into New Haven a lot and be around the Jagan family, the Freezes and the Jagans, and just be around New Haven where they lived, going to LBI, where Dr. Jagan spent quite a bit of time recreationally playing tennis and swimming and so forth. We'd be there. And I remember one day, Raymond Ali, my friend, turning to his father, he says, "Daddy, why doesn't Uncle Chetty give up?" We were in the car, and the father turned to me and says, because he's doing something noble for Guyana and he can't give up. So I grew with a sense of admiration for both men, but I had the closest relationship with Desmond Hoyt, if I can put it that way. But certainly, I didn't grow. My mind was not shaped so as to hate or despise, but to respect. And like I said, from dealing internally with those two families, I did not see hatred amongst the Jagans against Africans or against anyone, and neither did I see hatreds amongst the Burnhams against East Indians or other persons. And that is just, I'm sure that other people may have other stories to tell, but certainly being a young man and so a teenager and growing up within and around these two families, I never saw many of the things that both gentlemen were accused of. So I admired them, but like I said, it was only through Mr. Hoyt that I was birthed into politics, so to speak, and I learned a tremendous amount from him. Apart from Mr. Hoyt, I have a fairly close relationship with Mr. P.J. Patterson of Jamaica, who has acted as a kind of a mentor for me and to me over the last decade, and that I appreciate. So from time to time, I would look to him for advice, counsel, and I admire him and what he's done and the profile that he has achieved and maintained, especially after demitting office as Prime Minister of Jamaica. And again, I'll tell you a story that he shared with me, which I think I have permission to share. You know, we were chatting once recently, and he said to me he had a recent birthday celebration, and he said his greatest achievement, one of the greatest achievements he's had in life, was extending an invitation to his birthday for Edward Siaga, who was, of course, as you know, the leader of the JLP of Jamaica and his sworn arch enemy, because Jamaica had some bloody days in the 1980s and so forth. But he says, Raphael, Edward came and sat, ate, and danced at my party. So the point he was making, that here was a man with whom, you know, there was tremendous animosity. Many lives were lost in Jamaica. You know how their politics can be. And the point he's saying to me that at the end of the day, we are all in a struggle for betterment for people. And it's important not to carry the baggage of hatred around, because he was able, you know, as I said, to invite a person that many would consider to be the greatest enemy he's ever had, to come to his birthday, an intimate birthday celebration. And that person not only came, he said, but sat, enjoyed the food, and danced and celebrated. So that's a lesson for me, because in the way I practice politics, I try not to denigrate and to insult and to get too nasty and mean. Others may do that to me, but I've resolved that in my politics, I am not going to go to certain levels against anyone, because we're all passing through.
Yes.
And we all have to give an account. And we're not going to be holding offices forever. We're just custodians, stewards, in a way of the responsibility that is in our hands right now. And sometimes you need to look at things through the eyes of the other person. You know, is there anything that I did or I am doing that could cause this person to see me in this way? Or is it my associations? Or it could be past hurts and events in a person's life that could influence things. UC Kwayana, I've met him, but I've never really had the good fortune of sitting at his feet, so to speak, and hearing from him. But I've read quite a bit of what he's written, and you know, one of the things, he wrote a little booklet called entitled "No Guilty Race." But he was really making the point that every race in Guyana has done something against the other. So when it's like Jesus saying, who among you is without sin, you can cast the first stone. You see, Kwayana is saying that all, and that's something that people will not readily admit, all at some point in time in our recent history, we've all done something against the other. So the message there is really one of reconciliation, not one of extermination and total annihilation or damnation. But the truth is, we've got to find a way to we may not like each other, but we've got to accept the reality that we're all sharing the same geographic space, and circumstances are such that the country can't just be divided into two or three. It's too now integrated. I think maybe just after independence, that may have been there may have been a slim possibility for something like that. But right now, Ghana is too integrated. The people are mixing. You can go to Linden and find a person who has relatives on the quarantine. I could go to Maruka or in the Pomeroon, and I find people vending coming all the way from Mahaika to sell their products in Region One or Maruka or in the Pomeroon. So we've got to learn to, if not love each other, at least to respect each other. That's very important.
I know that you've said that, and listening to you talk about these majesty of political personalities, I must say. Forbes Burnham, the late president, Chetty Jagan, and Desmond Hoyt, and these people. You not to forget your parents and their influences. I think of a raw diamond or a diamond in the rough being passed through a process where each and every one of these cutters shaped, sanded, and molded you into who you've become today. And I must say that you're doing quite a great job. And so I asked this question with all your experiences, and I forgot PJ Patterson, all your experiences and exposure of all the committees you have either chaired, or been a part of. Which of these you believe, if allowed to grow and be effective, can make a significant difference in raising the living standards of the poor in Guyana?
Could you repeat that? I missed it.
Okay.
Of
all the committees you have either chaired or been a part of, right? Which of them you believe?
Well, my apart from law, my other area of expertise is national security. So when you're dealing with national security, it's called the guns versus butter issue. Do you spend more money on food or do you spend more money on weapons? I think that everything is integrated. There's no peace without justice. There's no peace without order. And so I believe in an ordered and orderly society. I believe that my work in constitutional reform, I've done quite a bit with that. I've been on most of the committees that have reviewed our national security strategies in the last decade and more. I've been involved in that. So some of these things don't appear to directly affect poverty, but I remember, but they do. In 2000, the World Bank published a study called "Voices of the Poor," and it is a fantastic publication. It's a bit dated now, but they took a sampling from around the world and what really constitutes poverty. And if you, for example, if you were in Sarajevo at that time, or Bosnia or somewhere, poverty was the inability to go to market to get a loaf of bread because there were snipers shooting at you. And if I can bring that closer to home, on the news today, the headlines were about 3 or 4 murders that took place between yesterday afternoon and this morning. And it occurred to me that this is what defines Guyana now, a lack of safety and security. And if a person cannot, having worked hard, honestly, be able to have a minimum of rest and peace in her home or his home, then that person is just as poor. That's the point I want to make. That person is just as poor because they cannot enjoy life and the fruits of labor. And so I would like to continue, and I have been working to help to relieve our issues of crime and security in Guyana. And I think once we settle that, alongside, of course, other things like joblessness and so forth, we can usher in a new dispensation, so to speak, of confidence and assurance that Guyana is a place that people can come and invest in, that persons, Guyanese by the thousands who live abroad and want to come home, retire home, can come and not be preyed upon and attacked in their home. So everything is important, and so I'd like to put my expertise where I am best suited, rather than running around doing everything. I did, at the postgraduate level, of course, study quite a bit of development economics, but I wouldn't consider myself to be an economist. But I have an appreciation for poverty reduction strategies and policies, and how they are applied and measured, and how they could be targeted and better implemented. So I can say I'm a bit of a jack of all trades, but my comfort zone is anything to do with governance, and security, and of course law as an offshoot of those.
When you were elected to Parliament in '98, what is one thing? What is one thing for which you were determined to campaign that you believed would benefit not only your constituents but the whole nation?
Well, then in '98, my passion was for constitution reform, quite frankly, because we just come through a very bitter election period with post-election confusion, Herdmanston Accord, and I actually had been quite involved, because after the violence and social unrest in '97, as you may recall, CARICOM brokered a peace accord called the Herdmanston Accord, and one of the things that it required was political dialogue between the parties. So each party, the PBP and the PNC, chose 3 people, and I was one of the 3 that the PNC chose. It's not something that is widely known, but for 3 years, the 2 parties met every afternoon almost in a city hotel, and we dialogued about everything. And while that was happening, there was also the case of Esther Pereira versus the chief elections officer. That was a case challenging the validity of the 1997 elections. I was a junior lawyer to Mr. Peter Britton, who was senior counsel at the time. We represented a petitioner. So during the day, I would be doing that case, and then in the afternoons, I would be at a dialogue, and whenever Parliament was convened, I was in Parliament. But the whole thrust was towards constitutional reform, because it was accepted that the Constitution as it was, and I hasten to say that even as it is now, still has, I think, many bad features, and by bad I mean features that are not helpful to the development of a cohesive society. We still have this executive presidency that we have diluted its potency a great deal. But when you have a highly charged political environment, and then overlay that with issues of race and ethnicity, and social stratas and class issues, when one person wins the presidency, there's a sense that one group has won and one group is therefore locked out. And so that is not helpful. It could be helpful in societies that have what are referred to as homogeneous societies, large groups that are comfortable. But when you have diverse ethnicities and cultures, such as Guyana, and this winner-take-all event on one day where one person wins it all, it does not augur well. You know, one of the things I really had advocated for was the splitting of elections for president and as against the assembly, like the way it is in America. I think there too much emphasis is placed on this one event on one day, and so you get a sense that it's a winner take all, as opposed to, let us stagger the presidency on a different 2 years before or 2 years after elections to National Assembly. Give more power to parliamentarians so that they could give representation to their constituents. As it is now, we have a party-list system which says that you vote for the party and not the actual member of parliament, and that I think is an anachronism. It is an unfortunate feature of our democracy that has to go. We really need people being accountable to people. Elected officials need to be accountable to people and not placed into parliament by the party. And I think it's been another feature that has kept us back, because it has really promoted, to a large extent, the paramountcy of the party over the paramountcy of the people. Mm-hmm. So those are things that I fought for. Of course, many of my views didn't sit well with Mr. Hoyt, but he respected them, or with the party. And so those are the things coming in as a young member of parliament that, of course, very idealistic, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But these were the things that, not just myself, but the young Turks, as we were called,
right,
back in '97. Those are the things we were advocating for. A form of a power sharing model, because we recognize that the Constitution as is really kept the races and the groups pitted against each other rather than working together.
If I may go to the chat room, Carl asked, what specific efforts are being made to restore an atmosphere of safety and security in Guyanese citizens?
Well, I think we have a lot of rhetoric. I personally believe that we need to try something new. One of the things we have to do is to have the government and the opposition parties working together on this issue of national security. It was recently demonstrated in Trinidad and Tobago, where the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition actually stood together and declared their joint efforts to fight it. But as you know, we have the opposition and the government are estranged and are at odds over the issue of the Minister of Home Affairs, who has responsibility for national security. But certainly there has to be something different, because what is happening, it is my view, that the criminals are becoming emboldened by the fact that the politicians are divided. And whilst we are fighting each other, they are making hay while the sun shines, if I can use an old, one of those old time proverbs. So we need a demonstration from the leadership of this country that this is a matter that concerns and affects all of us, and that we are prepared to work together to resolve it. We have in the opposition very good people with police and military backgrounds who I believe can offer good assistance. The government has to accept that it alone cannot solve this problem. And it's not just for security, but Selwyn, the World Bank statistics say that Guyana is the country, of all the countries in the world, Guyana ranks number one as being the most affected by the brain drain. 86% of our skilled labor now lives and works in a developed country. That's a staggering figure. But what I like to look at is the other side of it. It really means that about 12 to 14% of those who remain are trying to hold the country together. That is, provide national security, an education system, health care, build bridges and maintain them, provide development opportunities and so forth. The point I'm making is 12% of your skills cannot do the job. especially, and then when you extrapolate, you realize that 12 and 14% is fighting. They're not united. And then about 50% of that amount are waiting to migrate. So the point is, it is in our best interest to have some kind of working understanding that yes, there's a government and yes, there's an opposition, but there are certain fundamental pillars in our society that we will have to find common ground on. National security, education, health, agriculture, certain things should be sacrosanct and sacred that we must find a way to work together on, because the point I make is that if another government was simply to go into office, it will not result in an automatic improvement, because that other government will not have all of the skills required to bring to bear to solve the problem. It is beyond us. We have transnational crimes. We have weapons. Brazil is our border neighbor bordering us. They are a mass producer of weapons. Weapons are flowing through. We are contiguous to Colombia. The drugs continue to flow. So these are not issues that one minister can handle. There really needs to be a concerted effort. And we actually came close, because in 2001, there was actually a border national security committee established. It was chaired by Ralph Ramkarant, co-chaired by David Granger. I was a member of that committee. The Minister of Home Affairs was a member of that committee, and we worked well together. Again, these are not many things that many people know because of the nature of our work. Not that it was secret, but many of the things that we dealt with could be classified as confidential and even to some extent secret. But we were able to put aside our differences and work looking at our national security issues, our border issues, and what was happening within Guyana. And we actually gave some prescriptions. But lo and behold, the report that we produced never seemed to have found support higher up. And so that very good example of us working together was allowed to fade and to go away. So in the meantime, we're doing we kind of holding things together. And I think the police force is stretched to its limit. Its morale is low. Public impression of it is low. And the thieves, as I said, are becoming more emboldened by it. So I would start with a demonstration from the leaders, and I would have to include myself in that, showing the people of Guyana and those who are looking on from abroad that we are prepared in a national interest to put aside our differences. Every single day, there are about 2 or 3, you open the newspapers and there's some body discovered somewhere, man shot, person's throat slit, and then of course you got after that domestic violence. We just have an epidemic, and it has to be stemmed.
Listening to you, Raphael, at one point in your discourse, I felt a sense of doom and gloom. But I'm an advocate and a proponent of a silver lining. And when you spoke of the 12, right? When you spoke of the 12%, and this is why I am hopeful, because I didn't know of that particular statistic, but I know it must have been a very wide contrast. But you speak of the 12% and the fact that these people are home, and that's a very profound way of looking at it.
Yep.
And thank you for that. Because it does give me hope and encouragement. And each of us, I think of a village with one well, and the water is very low, and everybody throws a pebble, and eventually the water rises enough so that everyone can drink. And I think that's what this 12% is going to do. And you have answered some questions that I had here for you, like if there is a list of worries you have for Guyana, what would they be? You've answered that.
A list of
worries that
worries?
that you have about what's happening in Guyana. And I think
I've dealt with some of them.
Yes. I want to ask you, after 44 years of independence, What can you say is the economic and security state of our republic, from your perspective?
Well, both are nowhere where they were poised or capable of being. I go back to independence and the eve of it, and there was a broadcast on the BBC just the night before, or 2 days before May 26, 1966. And one of the commentators remarked on the broadcast that this was BBC, of course, is going throughout the entire Commonwealth and the world. He says, of all of Great Britain's colonies, the one best poised for greatness was Guyana, because we had the systems, the talents, the resources. We were ahead of Singapore. We were ahead of most of the African countries. We were certainly ahead of our sister Caribbean countries. The one most best poised to excel was Guyana. Our education system was better than most. I have actually encountered Brazilians who came here to be educated. The rich Brazilians send their children here. I came across an instance recently where a family sent their child from the Bahamas to be educated at Queen's College. So we were seen to be the place. So we've got to admit that from then to now, we have managed to hold together, but we have not managed to grasp and to harness that potential that we have. That word that we've grown up with, it's almost like a bad word now that you don't even want to mention it. So some people want to say that we're doing great, but that's relative. Mm-hmm. We've done fairly well, but we must concede, and we can't be false to ourselves that we have not. I think, rather I know that we have not gone to the extent to which we are capable of going. Guyanese, you check out any Guyanese, any part of the world, and you get a story of sterling excellence, of hard work, of thrift, of resourcefulness. Most have been forced to ply their trades and to go out of Guyana. So we are people who are known for hard work, for getting things done, for taking on responsibility. We need, I think, right now, a vision that can take us somewhere. There's a sense now that we are just drifting in a kind of a purposeless phase, and so what we really need is to get back to a vision and to have visionary leadership. I don't know whether it resides in one person or whether it really should come from a combination of persons. But certainly, I think the nation is crying out now for a vision to steer it. There are signs and there are pockets and there are components of development. If you move around the city, you will see massive construction and things happening and people driving the latest model vehicles and so forth. Some of these, of course, are suspect, but generally some people are doing well, and that is to be respected. But we haven't found a way of tying the pieces together to have a cohesive whole, so that we have a national developmental trust. So you can point to instances of excellence, but there's that. What is missing is that common thread that is woven through everything, so that you have a sense of where it is you're heading. I should say that Ghana is not unique in this regard. Every century or every decade brings its own issues and problems. We're grappling with the information, what I call information technology revolution, keeping up with it, being able to provide. Young people are demanding things instantly. as against, waiting or working. They want to be able to access, and that's their right, that's their expectation. And so governments have to learn to find their step, so to speak,
Talking
and get
ta-
in line.
talking about government, let me just take you back in history a little bit. Um, August 2006 elections. You were a presidential candidate for the
Yeah.
AFC and received 8.3 of the national vote and 5 of the 65 seats, becoming the third largest political party in Guyana. That's in 1 year after the party was formed. Congratulations. Why do you think AFC's message resonated with so many people at that time?
Well, people wanted something different, and the AFC was really formed to be the party that was the bridge between the races and the two parties. We were to stand in the middle, and I've always described the AFC or my generation as the children of the new Guyana, and so all of us, someone want to admit it, but we all carry the DNA of either the PPP or the PNC in some way or the other. And I think the sooner we accept that fact, it's like recognizing that that person over there is your cousin. You may not be the best, but is your cousin, is blood. So we carry the DNA, and the AFC was to be the bridge, the platform on which people could stand and relate. It's like the bridge between two banks of a river. On one bank, it's the PNC representing one block of society, and the other is the PPP representing another block. And we were to be the intermediary between, because in a sense, we are the children, we are the successors of these two. In both, I think there are aspects of some good, and in both there are aspects of some bad. But the sooner we come around to accepting, as I said earlier, that the purpose of the PNC should not be to annihilate the PPP. And the purpose of the PPP should not have been to annihilate the PNC, but to recognize that they both represent large blocks and of stakeholders. And so a mechanism has to be found to ensure that they can work together, even if there's minimum of trust. Some mechanism has to be found, and so the AFC really came to kind of separate them from an embrace a conflict that had been going on for 50 years, to separate them and to say the time has come to stop this fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Be competitive, but not destructive.
And in sorry, sorry.
Yeah, what I was saying is, it's okay to be competitive, but not destructive.
So in retrospect, is
Yeah.
there anything you would do differently if you were running for president today and circumstances were the same?
I would keep pushing the line of healing and reconciliation, which is, as I said, what motivated me to form the AFC, because we can't keep fighting. Because while we're waiting to get rid of and to destroy, the world is moving on, and not moving on at a snail's pace. It is moving on at lightning speed, and so we have to find a platform for reconciliation of the races. So that is what I would be more emphatic about it. I would push it some more.
Okay.
But I wouldn't change the message, so to speak. I would perhaps amplify it.
Well,
but I wouldn't change it.
Well, you saying that, now that you said that, I don't know if it's fair to ask you this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. In your opinion, because the AFC is still a viable party, and I guess it's growing and very vibrant. In your opinion, do you believe that the message needs recalibrating, has been recalibrated, or needs to be left alone to win in the next election?
Mm-hmm. I believe the message needs to be recalibrated. What happens, and it's quite normal and natural. Smaller parties, newer parties, of course, they come under tremendous pressure and opposition and attack. And so the AFC has had to maneuver to become, I think, a little too defensive because it takes a bombardment. And bear in mind that the AFC, when it came out, was not just in opposition to the government, but it was in opposition to a way of life, of a two-party dominant, a system dominated by two parties. And so we came in opposition against a way of life. And sometimes it's not easy to resist the urge to defend oneself and to react, and it takes tremendous courage, in fact, to sometimes turn the other cheek, or to be like a Gandhi or a Martin Luther, and stick to your principles without allowing yourself to become defined as this or that. You see what happens? Both sides in a battle that has been going on for 50 years will want to pull you to their side. So when you take a position on X, the other one criticizes you. When you take a position with that one, the other one criticizes you. So you have to stay in a middle position. And that position has to always be what is in the national interest. And in that way, you will be criticized sometimes. You will take flack, but at least you will gain the respect of both, because there's a tug of war over you and for you to come this way or that and to define you, and that is the duty of a third party, of a new party, to not allow itself to become defined as either being in this camp or in that camp, but continuing to do what is in the national interest. It may take some time, but in the end, I believe the people will respect that, and they will turn to it. And even those who are in the other camps will have to accept your way as being the better way.
You evoked Gandhi just now, and it leads me into a question in the chat room by Carl. Can you describe what healing and reconciliation looks like in Guyana's political reality?
Well, I believe I'm a good example of it. I have in me all of the races. Only this afternoon I got a hate letter about my Amerindian blood, but it wasn't the word Amerindian. It was the other derogatory term. That letter came to me today. So as you move around Ghana, you see young people mixing. You see mixed couples are now quite common, and they don't get a second look. Healing and reconciliation has to come if we are to be successful. There have been many calls for us to have a kind of a truth commission to go back and to address some of the hurts and the pain of the past. That is a start. I think that our leaders always have to keep a certain posturing, and to keep the rhetoric at a level that does not debase their offices. If I'm to use, for example, the current leader of the opposition, Mr. Granger, you'll never find Mr. Granger making any statement that is rash or irrational or insightful, and that I respect. But you won't find other leaders doing the same. So it takes a kind of a leader. It takes the people also demonstrating how it could be done and pulling their politicians with them, and it takes as well an opening up. And this is why having access to the internet and to television is so great, because you get a chance to see how other people are living without resorting to conflict and disagreement and dissension all the time. And so but it will take a committed effort. We've come close on several occasions, and then either personalities or events have interfered and affected our ability to really set ourselves on a path for lasting peace.
Millicent in the chat room said, you have identified many issues, political, educational, structural, etc. In Guyana. What are some of the solutions? IMO, the many parties provide a lot of talk and criticism, but no concrete solutions.
Well, the person asking the question is quite correct. Each party has a manifesto, well put together, much commonality, in fact, within them. But I go back to my point earlier about the 12% holding a country together. And so what it will take is an understanding that no one group, no one party has all the answers. And what I don't have, I can perhaps search on the other side to see if they have it. That is what is required. And right now, admittedly, there's a lot of rhetoric, a lot of talk, and insufficient action. But we are at a critical stage in our development. We have a for the first time a minority government situation, and I think the people designed this 10th Parliament this way, particularly to get us to talk to each other, to work together, because they're saying that we're not giving any one of you a commanding majority or the authority, and we're designing it in such a way that you can only succeed if you find a way to work together. So the solution is really for us to put aside some differences. Like I keep saying, no, not I don't want to make it appear that it's all is going to be well with just in one afternoon, but it requires bold statesmanship, statesman's approach or stateswoman's approach. I don't want to offend anyone here, but right now the main people in the driving seat are Donald Ramatar, His Excellency, Mr. Brigadier Granger, Leader of the Opposition, and Kemraj Ramchatan, three men. So it really needs those three men, quite frankly, and I've urged all three individually and collectively to meet more often and to talk and to begin to resolve our problems.
I every time I invite someone to appear on the show and I mention 1.5 hours, sometimes the response is, wow, hour and a half, what can I talk in an hour and a half? But we realize that sometimes the time is very nearly enough. And I'm looking at the questions that I have for you, Mr. Speaker. Lots of them I would love us to delve into. And time is creeping up on us. So I'm going to ask you a favor to lend us 10 more minutes beyond the 10 o'clock time. And if you don't mind, I'm going to go rapid fire because there are some questions there I would like you to answer.
Okay.
All right? And let's start. Since you mentioned you didn't want to offend anyone and you mentioned a woman, I'm going to ask you this. What do you believe will have to change to allow for a woman to be elected president of Guyana?
If I believe, sorry?
What do you believe will have to change to allow for a woman to be elected president of Guyana?
Well, bear in mind that we've had a woman elected already. So the fact that it could happen once, it means it could happen again.
Good.
I think we need to have more women involved in politics, rising to the fore. It's still a very male-dominated arena. I'm actually doing some writing, and one of the things came across some research done on this very issue of more women, and one of the criticisms women have of our politics, and rightly so, is that it is too combative, and they don't want to get involved in a market yard for kind of fighting all the time. So I was quite surprised to see that as one of it. There was a survey done by the National Democratic Institute, and there was a reporting process. So I'm reading through it, and so women are saying, look, we when we look on, obviously it's fighting and snarling and disagreement, and we don't want to be in such a thing. Another one is that women, they're saying that, look, we need more. We don't believe that the resources or the remuneration is good enough, and at least they're being honest, because they're saying we're not going to get into it because it's not enough, and it will affect our jobs, and we need to be able to provide. But more women are coming to the fore, and the parliament has, in fact, we are ranked 25th in the world in terms of the ratio of women in the House. So Ghana is doing very well in that regard. We could be doing better, but it's held up as a standard, certainly in the Caribbean and in this hemisphere. We do have 1/3 of the MPs now are women. We have 34% women in the House, which is good in comparison to many other parliaments.
And I hope in my lifetime, I hope that we one day rank number one. When we were children, there was a very powerful and successful women's movement, perhaps more, but the WRSM comes to mind. Why do you believe that dissolved, and what do you think a similar women's movement will do for Guyana?
Well, again, you have to look at what was happening at the time. The PNC was known as the vanguard party. You had a sense that you were building a nation. There was national service and things were happening. It's going to be very difficult to, I think, have that kind of a strong women's movement again. Each woman now feels singularly empowered, and women are still doing well. There's the Red Thread group, which does very good work. Another women's group, there's one called the 4S, which was launched recently. So much is happening, but I don't believe that you will see like a mass following or a mass organization. But women are very, very tuned in and in tune and involved with what is happening. But I think the days of mass-based organizations are fading away worldwide, because you use the social media now to stay connected, and to share information and to organize yourselves.
You wrote a book called Change.
Yeah.
And before I get into that, I want to ask this question, which can lead into that book. Why do you believe the political culture in Guyana needs to change, and what do you recommend? I mean, if you can do that in, short.
Well, again, it comes back to my central theme of healing and reconciliation and bold statesmanship to put us back on a visionary path of working together.
What is the hardest political decision you have ever made?
Having to delink from the PNC would have been the hardest decision I've ever made.
Now, feed, clothe, and house ourselves is a grand vision for Guyana, advocated by the late President Forbes Burnham and now others. What do you believe it will take for Guyana to accomplish this and also be the breadbasket of the Caribbean?
Again, not much. The political will to get it done. We have the land. They have the resources. We have the ability to feed the Caribbean. And so, I had this discussion with my father only today. Young people are not interested in the land. They don't see it as attractive. They don't see it as a means to an end. But it is the foundation of life is the earth. And I believe that we need to recalibrate, reorient, and just re-educate people about the value of owning land, of tilling land, of producing. It gives you a sense of connection to nature, to life, and I think there's no greater feeling than being able to produce something, whether it could be a tomato or a
very true.
A yam or something. So I think that governments need to become more focused. We had a Grow More Food campaign going for a few years here ago, but it was not sustained. And many dismiss it as an electioneering gimmick, because it just, again, seemed to be one group and not involving another. So I think it needs to be expanded and it needs to be permanent, and it is the way to go for the future.
Well, what surprised you the most about the position Speaker of the National Assembly?
What? Sorry?
What surprised you the most about the position Speaker of the National Assembly?
What surprises? I guess after being a member of parliament for 14 years, when I became speaker, it's as if I knew nothing, because the view and how you have to interpret things is completely different, because you become speaker of the entire assembly and for all members of parliament, those who the week before you were in argument with, or who were dissing you, as we say, you now have to protect that member of parliament. And so it was a surprise, because it's quite a difficult job, especially in this parliament. It's very difficult. But not to say that it's something to run from, but it's a responsibility that has to be taken very, very seriously.
And you know,
Go ahead.
You're saying that I really want to get into your book Change. Someone in the chat room, Millicent, said I might have missed the following, but any comments on crime and the filthy state of our once garden city? But before you answer that, I would like you to address this. What do you make of remarks by the former Speaker of the National Assembly, Ralph Ramkaran, about your handling of Minister Clement Roy's gag order?
Well, I think I don't remember specifically, but Mr. Ramkaran had agreed with my decision to lift the gag order, but he found that I should have just made my decision without putting it in written form. That we all have different styles in the way we do things, and I'm very mindful of the fact that I am presiding over a house that is unprecedented in the Caribbean and Guyana. We've never had a minority government, and so everything I do will be judged in history, years to come from now. I remember when that came up, I turned to Jamaica, I turned to Trinidad and Tobago, and the speaker said to me, "You're on your own. We don't know how to deal with a situation like this." And so it's like cricket. When you're looking at a game, it's easy to tell the batsman how to play the stroke, but when you're out there and the ball is coming at 110 miles per hour at you, is a different thing. So Mr. Ramkaran, I respect. He was speaker for 10 years, and so he had more of an ease and a comfort, I think, after 10 years in the seat with making decisions. I had just come into the seat, and it was just a few months, and had to face something that was unprecedented. And I can tell you this, Selwyn, as I went through the world, only one other country in the world had a situation like that, and that was Australia. And so even at 2 and 3 in the morning, I was in conversations with the officials in Australia about how it was dealt with, what were the differences. And I believe that as a steward, and I come back to being a steward, I had a duty to reduce my reasons in writing and to be able to explain them, because I must be able to say at the end of the day, this is my decision and this is why I made it, and I must be able to rationalize my decision and not just say, well, this is my decision and I don't have to give you a reason or explanation for it. I must be able to support every decision I make with good reasoning based on what is known as good, sound parliamentary practice and law. And so I took, and I met him, and I said I thanked him, because of course there are always, in retrospect, things you could do better, but I respected his comments, and I must say that he does from time to time provide me with advice and opinions, which I respect and take on board, and I refer to many of his rulings in support of my own from time to time too.
Talking about being judged by history, I want to mention some historical names, and I start with coffee, that is known to all of us. The late President Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham, Sir Lionel Lockwood, Fred Wills, President Desmond Hoyt, Dr. Chetty Jagan, Janet Jagan, Viola Burnham et al., regardless of how some may view the contribution to the history of our nation by those whose name I referenced. I believe it is important that whoever chronicles what happened and happens is authentic and has the integrity to do so with accuracy.
Yeah.
I say this because I believe that the future of any nation, its youths, deserve the truth. In your capacity as Speaker of the National Assembly, how can you ensure or contribute to ensuring future of that robbed of that privilege?
Well, I'm very keen on documentation. Everything must be documented and recorded. And so I'm in the process of getting funding for us to do live streaming now of all of our debates so that the people can see what's happening. Nothing should be hidden or kept, covered. So we're ensuring that the parliament becomes the people's parliament. Again, it should be open to them. People should feel free to come and hear our debates if they're around, or if they want to look at it on television or on the internet. It's there, and we're going to have a website which we're working on again, so that every debate is posted on the website and you can go back and look at our records. So keeping records is important. I'm actually writing a book on our parliament. I hope to finish it this month. So that's a work in progress as well.
Well, let's in respect of the chat room, let's go to Millicent's question, where she asked if there was any discussion about or mention about about crime and the filthy state of our once garden city, and the burial ground.
Well, we spoke extensively on crime, and I did say what my own views were in terms of what was happening. But again, it's a demonstration by the leaders of this country that crime is one of those things that we will find commonality on and unite on. And I think the minute we do that, it will send a strong message to the criminals that there is order.
Yes.
Sheila Holder, the former one of the leaders of the AFC who passed, unfortunately, one of her favorite sayings was that nature abhors a vacuum. And when these criminals see fighting at the top and a sense of disorder and disarray, they fill the vacuum, and they become emboldened. I know that some people, will say, bring out, oil up the gallows and let's do hanging, and then the human rights people will be against it. But from time to time, that's a different argument. But from time to time, we have to be able to demonstrate that at the national level, when it comes to crime or security issues, the preservation of life and liberty and the protection of it, that we will stand together and do what has to get done to bring order into our society. And I think that is lacking. And we desperately need a demonstration of leadership on that. In terms of the other matter of the Garden City, only before coming here, I saw a letter from His Worship the Mayor. That is a perennial political football. We formed a committee, which is meeting actually, Mayor, Parliament, and government. I don't think it's still in its formative, it's deliberative stages. We haven't yet produced a report. But again, there's a sense of, a pervasive sense of disarray. And you can put your finger on any sector, health, education, security. And it is because there's a belief that the leaders, the visionaries, the elected officials are not working together. And I think the day we start to come together and identify some critical areas and work them, it is the day you're going to start to see a transformation in this country. So the state of the city is more of a symptom of that illness, of that paralysis that has taken over. The city does need more resources. It's again an age-old issue of lack of resources, but there's also a lack of will, I think, to do anything. People, and this is put aside the city, people are discarding their garbage wherever they want. It's almost as if there's a sense of a rebellion in the way people are doing things.
And just touch a bit on the burial ground.
On
The burial ground.
uh,
Yes, that very
that
disrespectful. Yeah,
uh,
just a little bit.
it's easy to blame the mayor and city council for that state of affairs, but I think we all have to take some blame and responsibility for it. The parlors that make millions from selling the plots, they don't seem to have any interest. The people who continue to the churches that continue to hold services and send their people there and relatives there. Uh, we have to take some responsibility. The city council, of course, and government, I think, ultimately. But for now, the people who benefit most or who use it the most are unfortunately silent and just allowing. And yeah, it's just another area of our lives that we've just allowed. There's a malaise that has set in, just allowed to go. So it's a horror story. It's like a jungle. Every now and then some work is done on it, but the will to do something profound and transformational is gone. And I think the time has come for us to actually identify a new plot. It's got to be out of Georgetown, obviously, but the current cemetery has outlived its usefulness, and I think most, if not all, of the available land area has been utilized, and the time has come for. It might be a very good investment for someone to come and open a kind of a U.S. or North American styled cemetery, and my impression is that people will readily go and pay the fees and so forth, but certainly the city council's ability to manage and maintain the current facility is spent, and the time has come for us to open a new one. We just try to hold this one together, and it's not working.
Talking about land, Michelle Kay said children or teenagers respecting the land. Has that been expanded into the schools? I remember as a child toiling the land as part of our school every Friday.
No, that's now absent from the schools. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about us in the 1970s, 80s. You had a sense things were tough, but you had a sense of nationhood and nation building.
Yes.
And even if there was a plan, let me put it that way, there was a plan. It may not have been the right plan, or it may not have had all of the right features, but you had a sense of some plan at work. And every so often the plan was updated and it moved in cycles. It was, house, feed, and clothe or something. But now it seems that, we've become more self-governing, where every person is their own government, so to speak, and you're on your own. And you've got to take care of your own affairs. What we need is a vision, and that's lacking.
Your book, Change, right, is a collection of writings and speeches on your journey for change. What does change in this context look like to you?
Well, as I said out there, I've gone through different areas. Youth, I've dealt with issues of security. I've dealt with governance, and so for me, it is really touching the fundamental pillars of our society, and trying to bring some order and regularity to them, as I've set out in my different writings and speeches. But it comes from, again, visionary leadership, and a leadership that recognizes the good in all and in everything. But if we start off despising, hating, seeking to destroy and destruct, that will get us nowhere. And that, unfortunately, has been the predominant method of dealing with each other politically, and it has not worked. And so we've got to come around to accepting that we each have to share the space.
And
work it.
but before we continue, where can one purchase a copy of this book?
Well, the copies were at last. I'd left copies at Austin's bookstore, but I got to check to see if they've been sold out. They may have been. I have a few left, which I could resupply to Austin's.
And that's in Guyana, because we're a global community.
But the next time I see you, I can leave some with you. I haven't been to New York in about 2 years.
Wow. Well, you're scheduled for a visit.
Yes.
Who in? I don't know if this is a fair question, but I'm going to put you on the spot. Who in or out of the political theater do you believe has not just the ability and courage, but also the integrity and vision to unravel the socioeconomic knots that have bound this nation for so long and chart a new course for the benefit of all Guyanese?
That's a question. It's not that it's difficult to answer, but I don't think that there's any one person.
Yes.
As I said before, but because as I look in the opposition benches, I see people who are quite capable. I look in the government benches, I see people who are capable, and so in civil society, private sector, there are people who are capable. So right now, I don't see a person, but I see persons who, if they decide to stand up and to make a difference, can make a difference. But I would stop short of saying that this person, in my view,
Right.
is. But I do see people who I believe are capable, but they've got to take that decision that we're going to do things differently than the way we've been taught to or been instructed to. And I think the day we get that brave step from some of them, we'll start to see a turnaround.
Mr. Speaker, you have been in public life forever, so there isn't much not known about you, but you're also private and thoughtful, which I know personally. What can you tell us about you that most do not know and would surprise us?
Well, something I guess my family knows. I'm quite an introvert.
Mm-hmm.
I do what I have to do publicly, but at the soonest opportunity, I like to go back to a book or something. I'm not not much of a very social. I'm okay, but I'm not. I don't crave the spotlight or go out. In fact, every time I have to speak publicly, I'm quite nervous. Whenever I have to speak publicly, but after a few minutes, it passes. But that's it. That's something that people don't see as being present in politicians.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm not a crowd person, but of course I've addressed rallies with thousands of people, and I've done.
Isn't that something?
What I have to do.
I said, isn't that something? If I go to the chat room, Astel Collins said, "Great show, Dad. Thank you, son. I applaud your tenacity and salute your journey. I am very proud to witness your brilliance, and I thank you for not giving up. I appreciate the honesty of your honorable guest." And Michelle K said, then that answers his own question. How then can the respect that is lacking be reinstated? Raphael, I have to ask you this question. And then I have like 3 questions we want to really rapid fire. We close the show. What positive contribution would you make as a Speaker of the National Assembly to stem government's irresponsible spending? And if you were a candidate, the proliferation of poverty and domestic violence against women in Guyana?
If I'm Speaker?
If no, two parts. If you were a speaker,
Uh-huh.
to stem government's irresponsible spending, but if you were a candidate and won, the proliferation of poverty and domestic violence against women in Guyana.
Well, as speaker, my ability to make decisions is very, very limited. What I've tried to do as speaker is to bring a sense of fairness and propriety to decision making. That makes me popular with all members at one time or the other. But I think we've got to move away from making decisions based on anger, based on revenge, based on who you are and what you look like or who you look like or whose child you are, and do what is right. And so I am trying to make my decisions based on that. That's what I do as speaker. Now, in terms of candidate and dealing with women, I celebrate women. I have, like I said, my mother raised me. My mother was the father who raised me. My parents were not together from when I was a very young child, and so I've grown up in an environment where women have held their own. So it's sometimes I can't see or I don't know how to be chauvinist, if I can put it that way, because I just didn't grow up like that. So having two sisters as the only boy, I have an elder sister who I think the world of. She's been very protective of me, very supportive of me, a good counsel and advisor to me. And so my outlook on how I see women has been quite enlightened from a very young age. When I was on the city council, for example, during that period, I was also chairman of the legal and security committee of the city council. And one of the things I pushed for and engineered was the appointment of the first female chief constable of the city, Miss Gail George. Of course, I got all kinds of things thrown at me, and the most ridiculous, of course, in Ghana, you must like the woman or something. It was a big woman. But she was a woman in her own right, who had achieved a senior rank, and I made it my duty that before I demitted office as a councillor and in my position, I would make sure that the first woman chief constable of the city came, and she did an excellent job. I left in '98 to become a member of parliament, and so we have to look at women's issues through the eyes of women. We can't stay as men and decide that we know what's best for women. And so the best thing to do would be to try to understand what affects women and how they'd like to see it fixed. And where I have shortcomings as a man, I would have to solicit the support of women to get that done. But I believe that, like I said, from my own upbringing as a child and the way I was brought up by a very strong woman in my mother, and having two very loving sisters who actually taught me quite a bit about how to respect women, how to respond and to treat women. I think that I could make a contribution alongside others in alleviating the sufferings, both in terms of poverty, domestic violence, and others. I have a different, when it comes to domestic violence, I have a different view that people don't like. I believe that if you behave like an animal, and that I speak to the men here, you should be treated as an animal. I have a problem with men who rape. I have never, as a lawyer, taken a rape case, and I never will. I can't, men chopping at children, and so I really can't comprehend how a human being could do these things. And if you become animalistic, I believe, I have to respect rule of law and all of that. But I believe that there should be some severe punishments for persons like that, and simply just taking you through the court process, putting you in a cell by yourself is for me not sufficient. But that's another story. But like I said, because of my upbringing and the role that women have played in my life, I really, really have a high regard for women and I know what they're capable of. In many regards, as they continue to prove they can do just as good as and oftentimes a better job than we can in any area of life.
I agree. I totally agree with that. What are you most proud of?
Hello?
What are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? Ooh, I don't think that I've yet attained that. Like I said, I believe that over the last 3 or 4 years, I've just begun to live the life that I should have been living many years ago, and so I think that I'm still in my infancy stages of development, and I've squandered many good years.
I would love, with your permission, to I said I would love, with your permission, to borrow that explanation. I am going to use it in my own discourse. Thank you for that.
So I think I wouldn't say that I can look and know this. I don't think that I've really achieved and accomplished the things that I should have and I'm capable of. And so I will reserve that for when I'm much older. So when I can look back.
So last two questions. How would you like to be remembered?
That one I worked out already years ago. That my gravestone should just say, "Here lies a man who tried his best."
I like that.
That I've already written that out at least 15 years ago. That I know that I have imperfections,
right.
But my heart, I think, is always going to be in the right place. I will always try my best, but I recognize that I may fall short sometimes. I have fallen short, but I will do my best to correct the things that I've done wrong in my life or I'm not getting right.
Yes.
But and I don't want to be seen as I don't want to ever portray myself as being perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore I don't want people to see me as infallible or incapable of wrongs, but at least to recognize that in my life that I will have tried my best to accomplish the things that I think that God has asked me to.
And a question I ask every one of my guests: what makes you laugh out loud?
What makes me
laugh out loud?
I love comedy. I love humor. I love I love to laugh actually, but my sense of humor might be a little different. Every now and then I look at the Big Bang Theory. That gets me laughing. That's I find great humor in Parliament. I had your sons here one evening. I don't know if they told you, Astor and Alistair, and they were flabbergasted that Parliament that what was happening actually happens. Some of it could be quite comic, and I like to say it's like the Theatre Guild or Culture Centre all over again some nights. And a lot of showmanship and grandstanding and thing takes place. So it's good to laugh at yourself sometimes. It's good to find humor in tense situations. And it's good to just sometimes laugh at some ridiculous things.
Yes.
And not to always be serious. And so that's what I'm saying. I would put on a show, The Big Bang Theory, and I'd have a good laugh. And then I would turn to an email that I just received from the leader of the opposition or from the chief whip of the government, and I got to deal with that. But it's good to not take yourself too seriously sometimes, and to take every situation as if it's as if the earth is going to collapse. So I laugh. I love to read. I love to see a good movie. I love comedies, I love comic situations. I don't like the raunchy, vulgar stuff.
Right.
But good, intelligent comedy gets my attention.
And also ask my guests to take us out with a few words of wisdom, and you've given us so many. So, what I'm going to ask you to do, Raphael, is tell us one of your favorite quotes that really inspires you.
There's so many. But one of them, as I told you, I mentioned before, where Harold said, you're not better than anyone, and neither is anyone better
than you. I like that.
Than you. That's one. I love Shakespeare. There's a quote from there's a poem called "The Rape of the Lock" that gave us two famous quotes by Alexander Pope. One of them we know quite well. Only not even angels rush in where fools dare to tread.
Tread, yes.
Sorry, only fools rush in where angels dare to tread. And then in that poem as well, there's one that says, "What mighty contests rise from amorous things." This love and passion bring all kinds of quarrels and mighty contests. But I love literature. I love quoting from. Martin Carter, and other local and Caribbean poets. And I just enjoy life. You mentioned coffee earlier, and something that I found out quite perchance recently that I think would be of interest to many people is that coffee, of course, is portrayed as an African strong man, but his letters, first of all, he wrote in Arabic, which meant that he was more than likely a Muslim, and so in Holland right now, they're restoring his letters to the governor, the Dutch governor. And in one of these letters, he's actually appealing to the governor on a religious level, saying, how could you as a Christian do some of the things or allow some of the things that you allow or say and do? And so you had then a religious and ideological debate going on between coffee in Arabic and the Dutch governor responding in Dutch about religion and Islam and Christianity. So those are the things that fascinate me: language, history, good quotes. Winston Churchill, one of his quotes, he says, very short speech. He went to school. He says, "Never, never, never, ever
never
give up."
Right.
And he sat down, and that was the man's speech. I think it was about 12 words. Never, never, ever, ever give up or something. And he sat because everyone knew him for his brilliant speeches, but that was his speech. So I like to read and quote.
Well,
different.
Mr. Speaker, I have to say, that's a very good place to close this conversation tonight. I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your candidness, your eloquence.
Thank you very much. It's been a long interview, perhaps one of the longest I've ever done. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I wish I could have answered more questions, and I wish I perhaps could have answered some of them differently and more succinctly. But thank you very much for the opportunity.
Mm-hmm. You did well. You did well.
Okay, well, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
And have a good night.
And you too.
Good.
You too. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Suffer the little children to come unto me. Every day, more than 30,000 children around the world die of preventable diseases. More than 300,000 children are being used in war as child soldiers. Lord have mercy. A child should be loved. A child should be held. A child should be clean. A child shouldn't smell. A child shouldn't go to bed hungry at night. A child should be taught wrong from right. A child should learn to say thanks and please. A child shouldn't suffer from preventable disease. A child is a fruit that shouldn't be picked before it's time. To do that to a child should be classified